Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today I'm joined by Felipe Furiati, who is Senior Director of External Supply Operations at Grünenthal. Felipe, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Lux. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. From starting in pharma in QA to being a consultant at Bain Consulting, you're now at Grünenthal in the external manufacturing supply operations and managing both crisis turnarounds and M&A integrations across a €2 billion portfolio. So maybe we could start off, Felipe, by talking about how you first entered the pharma industry.
Yeah, so I'm a pharmacist myself in industrial pharmacy. So was a natural path of entering. And I started as a QA intern. And then I also developed on a graduate operations program at Johnson & Johnson and early in my career. And then from that, I started to develop my path in operations in pharma.
From there, then you went to Bain. So what was the move from pharma into management consulting?
Yeah. So after a while, I moved countries and also I was in medical devices as well for a while. But I was getting very technical in the sense of working in QA, and I wanted to broaden my spectrum on the business element and decided to pursue a full-time MBA. And then after, with the goal of entering management consulting to also broaden my understanding of different industries. So that was the path. So going to full-time MBA and then going to management consulting to just see other industries, other practice, and so on.
What drew you back into pharma after that period of time consulting?
I think as a pharmacist myself, I've always been pretty passionate about the industry and the impact we have on patients and the general well-being. So to me, it was almost of a natural path to go back to pharma after the management consulting. I didn't want to be a consultant for my whole life. And I decided that. So then that was the path back to pharma. To me, it was a very natural path, and to pharma operations, which was my home turf from early start of the career.
Yeah. Do you think it gives you a different perspective now on pharma, I suppose, in general, but maybe more particularly external manufacturing than if you just stayed always working in life sciences, having that sort of wider view of different industries and how they operate?
Absolutely. I think once you go to management consulting, there's a term is called consulting toolkit. So first is that you acquire that toolkit that you can apply to multiple industries, including pharma. So, and then also the view of other industries, very different industry as well. I've worked in projects in energy generation, steel industry, logistics, and that gives a perspective of the challenges of other industries faced as well. And sometimes they're not the same challenges, but it gives you a better understanding how to tackle as well the external value chain challenges we have in pharma.
Great. Let's talk about your role then at Grünenthal. What does your role cover? I mean, I mentioned at the top that you've crisis turnarounds are part of it, M&A integrations, obviously CMO relationships. But I guess what does a day in the life look like?
So I'm part of the external supply operations team in Grünenthal, and it involves day-to-day CMO relationship management. So we are the main point of contact to the CMOs. It also involves integration activities. So products that have been acquired or being acquired into Grünenthal's portfolio, and how do we integrate from an external value chain perspective. And finally, there's an element of M&A that Grünenthal is pretty active at it. And then to do this buy-side evaluation. So if we are looking for a new product portfolio, what is this impact going to be in the organization? What is this external value chain of the potential of this opportunity looks like, and how we can better integrate it in the future, and most importantly, capture the synergies of a potential acquisition.
Quite a strategic role then. Would you mind outlining what Grünenthal's overall strategic objectives are and what that means in terms of external supply?
Yeah, of course. The role itself, I would call it, there's both the operational and tactical, also the strategic, so the three elements, because operation on the day-to-day, this is a big part of the role. On the Grünenthal's general strategy, Grünenthal's vision is a world free of pain. So as this vision is the driver of the investment of the company in R&D, focus in pain. So Grünenthal invests quite a lot in R&D in pain as a therapeutical area. That said, to fuel these R&D investments, part of Grünenthal strategy, a pillar of the Grünenthal strategy, is to grow via acquisition of mature products or mature brands. And that's what I was mentioning before when we look at the portfolio of products to acquire. Grünenthal has been quite successful in the M&A sphere in the last decade and grew the company's portfolio quite substantially. And then, as you can imagine, when you grew this product portfolio via acquisitions, you're actually adding a lot of external partners into your portfolio. And then that's how we actually, not only in the evaluation, but in the integration and the management of these new partners, that's where it lands to the external supply organization in Grünenthal.
So as part of that, then, tell us about the crisis management task force.
Yeah, this is related to a product acquired. So there was an acquisition. In this acquisition, let me split on when you're evaluating the acquisition, you try in the due diligence part, you try to cover all the elements of how the supply reliability, quality, cost is in order to integrate that product. But you sometimes, once it lands on inside your doors, then the reality is quite different. So then that's when we had this crisis management, because we had a supply disruption, a supply situation with this specific product. And then I've been leading this task force, what we call, which is quite complex because it's a product that there are multiple substreams that we divided, and with different CMOs as well. We focus on one of the CMOs of the drug products for the product resupply, but not only that, you have substreams of, for example, CMC and regulatory substreams for dossier harmonization. We have, for example, substreams from the MSI, which is Manufacturing Science and Integration, or MST for some companies, Manufacturing Science and Technology, for evaluate the process and product robustness. So this is all under this umbrella of this crisis management task force that I had the opportunity to lead. I'm currently doing it.
How do you get the right balance between that immediate firefighting with longer term network building, longer term network optimization? And are there any frameworks that you use around this, around which CMO relationships to focus on, which ones to look at exiting? How do you tend to sort of break down these different challenges?
Specifically on the crisis management, I would say that it's almost stop what you're doing and go there and put down the fire. So and that's what we've been doing now. But we, as you said, we need to have the longer view, right? Who we want to partner, who we want to strengthen the relationship. We in Grünenthal, we have a CDMO segmentation frame that takes into account, amongst other elements, the importance that the CMO has to Grünenthal and the importance that Grünenthal has to the CMO as well. So we consider that in order to build a longer term relationship. Grünenthal is a middle-sized company. So as you can expect, if we're sizing with companies too large, we might actually lose a little bit of our negotiation power. If we're sizing with companies too small, we're actually scattering too much the portfolio.
What would you say the right balance is? I mean, would you want to be taking up a third of their capacity? Do you have any metrics around that?
Yeah, we do have within the frame of the segmentation, what is the criteria, including capacity and so on. Our volumes currently, and volumes, product portfolio, and so on, I wouldn't say we're in a position that we are occupying most of our CMO's capacities. So we also need to understand our reality on the volume and scale in order to partner up. So capacity is definitely a big topic, but it's not something that we are, for our size, it's not something that we are occupying, let's say, full CMOs. Sure. There's another thing that is important as part of Grünenthal's strategy is that Grünenthal we have multiple manufacturing sites, so multiple 5 manufacturing sites, fully integrated, vertically integrated from API until secondary packaging. And this is also an element to consider, that we not necessarily the external supply function, but a broader function on global operations, we're also looking at opportunities of insourcing when it makes sense. So this is also on the balance. We're not a fully externalized company as other mid-sized companies are, and we have this balance as well of the insourcing versus outsourcing and how does that play a role.
Which can make things more complicated sometimes, right? Because I think understandably, companies are much more precious and protective of their own facilities than they would be of external. I mean, how do you tend to manage the politics, perhaps?
This is a great question. I think this is a challenge that I as a professional, I work with transparency. So I think transparency is really important also in general to work with the CMOs. And if you're engaging in relationships, they need to have the transparency to what is our goals in the long term as well. So if our goals is to whatever insource a product, I think we need to be upfront in order to build the long-term relationships with that very CMO that sometimes we taking out our product, that we're going to bring another product from a new acquisition and so on. So I think for step number one is transparency with the CMOs. Otherwise, we're burning bridges. And then internally, sometimes it's not purely on financials, the decisions. Sometimes the organization, depending on the strategic importance of a given product, we want to potentially in source, and then we need to navigate that in the capacity of an external value chain, in the external operations lead, or we also understand that we will quote unquote lose portfolio and gain in the future. So that's the scenario we need to navigate. And again, with a lot of transparency with the CMO. So that's the way you actually build bridges and relationships, even when you're actually taking volume out of them, which happens.
On the point you made, Felipe, about being a medium-sized pharma company and so not being able to promise massive volumes, being more specialist than that, how do you build those strategic partnerships where it's not just all about volume and capacity? Do you have any advice or any strategies which can work to build those longer term strategic relationships which aren't just purely volume based?
One of my challenges, because Grünenthal, although we're a mid-sized company, we can be quite complex as any pharma organization with multiple stakeholders and multiple functional areas dealing with the CMOs, right? So we don't work in a way that the external supply operations team is the filter of the CMO relationship. We are the focal point and we are the facilitators, right? So that's the challenge itself. And I say to the team and the cross-functional team always is we need to strive to be an easy client, because being an easy client with clear goals, what we want, internal alignment, it's key for a successful long-term relationship with CMOs. And I think when we talk about external manufacturing leaders or professionals, the first thought in mind is that we're managing external partners, right? But I think equally important is how we manage internally. How do we actually align internally and bring that one message to the CMOs and to the external partners? This is so important to build the relationships themselves. So I think that's for external manufacturing professionals. Do not this is core of your activity, is how you actually translate internal needs into the external world in order to avoid mixed messages and in order to avoid that you become like a difficult client. And then everything that entails that.
Any advice on how to do that? Because it can be a very complicated matrix of virtual teams, perhaps different virtual teams around each product or certainly each area of the portfolio. How do you try to make all of that complexity simple and easy?
Yeah, this is the challenge, I guess. We try to divide. I think if once you divide yourselves in the value stream of the product oriented, you can put everyone that is responsible for that given product, let's say internal quality or supply chain and so on, under a framework we call virtual site operating teams, which is the core. It's led by external supply, but also you have quality, you have supply chain, you have MST, MSI. And on that forum, the external manufacturing professional, in this case, this external supply operations team, you need to have that visibility. So we're not filtering, but we do have the entire visibility. So you have, as an external manufacturing professional, also develop an understanding of the functional areas and internal challenging of the functional areas. You need that skill in order to challenge internally and guarantee and build internal relations as well. As important as external relations, internal relations to build. So then once the organization and the functional areas see you not as a burden, not as a filter, but actually as a tool to facilitate the relationship, really a facilitator, a relationship with the CMOs. Once you've seen that in the internal organization, everything follows, because they will go after you and saying, okay, this is instead of that's pretty much it.
It must be from all the various acquisitions and the many different products and many different supplier relationships. It must be a significant long tail of suppliers. How do you approach that, the segmentation of that tail, and what initiatives do you have in order to manage that, find economies of scale? How do you look at that?
Yeah, this is a great question, because the tail management, I think it's something that all pharma companies are looking at, to how to reduce it and so on. I think the first thing is understand the reality of the organization. So in our case, as you mentioned, we might not necessarily have the breadth of the portfolio, even though we are acquiring, and the volumes, right? So then in order to, I haven't seen in my experience a case that you are able to bundle tech transfers and transfer to all, although we have discussed that in the past. And although that we have seen theoretical examples from consulting companies saying that it is completely possible, I'm yet to see in practice when you're getting 10 products and bundling and doing a tech transfer. Maybe there are success stories out there, and I'm keen to hear actually. So then in addition, another way to actually manage the tail for the larger organization sometimes is pruning, right? So then they're just kind of like killing the product, because we are also, often we don't have this privilege. Because of our size, we're not pruning products that are profitable. So the idea is that we, in the segmentation view, we try to manage smartly, and then getting the tail with the minimal touch as possible. What does that mean? That means that I just mentioned like the virtual site operating teams, that for the larger products or larger CMOs, we're exercising more time on it. And for the more ones that we call transactional CMOs, then we're pretty much in a transactional basis and try to have as little touch as possible, because this way you can maximize the, just give me a second.
Sure.
You can maximize your time and the time of the team on the products and CMOs that actually bring you more benefit. And the tail then is the tail. It gets longer and longer. And then to me, the solution is that to identify that, and then just do what we call a light touch. So just a very kind of transactional basis.
Different levels of engagement across the tech.
Yeah. So for example, we have with our priority suppliers, we might have like twice a year business review meetings on site, for example. And then for priority or preferred suppliers as well, we would have monthly meetings or by twice a month meetings. It depends on the importance of the product, and or that this is VSOT meetings that we call, which is a virtual site operating team meetings, but also that involves like the SNOP meeting, the quality meeting, and the quality team, and so on. Because naturally we'll have projects, we'll have more changes with these vendors and so on. On the other hand, with the transactional suppliers, we might actually not have regular meetings at all. We just meet on an as needed basis. And to us, that would make sense. There's one caveat to that, is that the transactional suppliers, they are not necessarily just driven by volume. This is very, very important, because if you have a volume or spend, because sometimes you have a supplier or a CMO that you have little spend and little volume, that somehow that CMO impacts a very important product for the organization. And in that case, if you treat it as transaction and something goes wrong, you might have an impact down the line to your product. So this is part of the frame that we need to consider, and then treat that maybe low volume, low spend supplier in a different way, maybe in a priority way.
How many CMOs and suppliers are we talking about in your
We're
network?
about 90. So
Right,
it's not the longest, but yeah, it's
significant.
yeah.
How do you use digital tools in order to help to manage that? And I guess whether that's those that you're currently managing already, or those that you might be suppliers which you might be evaluating as part of a supplier selection process or RFPs. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think we have a journey to go still to manage increasing the digitalization in our supplier management. I know that there are some organizations that offer to digitalize or to automate processes across CMOs and clients and so on. I think we are in a journey. So we are in
Mm.
a journey, for example, to digitalize from the supply chain perspective, be more forecast and so on. There is already more advanced on the stem of the POs. And then this is from the day-to-day supply management as well. And also some part of the quality automated for the change controls and so on. And then it's advancing and somehow more advanced. On the selection, we developed a tool of a CMO database tool
Okay.
to identification of CMOs for RFPs and RFQs. Before this tool was developed, it was very analogic in the sense that knowledge based, who from based on a technology, who knows, or you know, very depending on the procurement or external supply professional to say who are your contacts, what are the companies you know, and then you send out RFQs, and then you do like searches as well. Once we develop this tool, which is a tool that we developed a taxonomy of technologies, let's say different technologies.
Which is hard. Having tried to develop taxonomies around CMOs and CDMOs myself, it's complex.
It is very complex. We had the support of internal, so this exercise as well is very reliant on, and luckily we have this internal network of sites and knowledge and
Mm.
manufacturing internally. So we relied on the engineerings, on the sites, technologies, so really technical knowledge to say what it makes sense from a site perspective, not from a CMO relationship perspective, but from a site perspective. If I'm selecting a CMO, what is the technologies and how do you break down this taxonomy? So this we
Mm.
relied a lot on the internal knowledge. And once we develop that, of course, you have the flaws, and you need to also understand what are your needs. For example, we were developing, and then there's a whole thing of, let's say, cold chain, right? Cold chain. How many? Is that important to me to define that cold chain as a requirement for a CMO? Yes or no? If
Mhm.
it's not, I should not consider, of course, because if you try to consider every single variable of technology and so on, that gets super complex. So the balance between the complexity, but also your needs, and focus on your needs. And we did that, I think, quite successfully
Mm.
to avoid overcomplication of the tool. And once we have this tool, we are able to actually identify CMOs for RFPs, and often there are particularities within a given RFP, whatever, maybe a specific technology for that given product, that the CMOs will identify. They said, well, we're not interested, we don't have this given technology. But
Mhm.
we are already starting from a long list that is much easier than going and scattering business cards, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. With that type of project, it'd be interesting to know what kind of results you're seeing, and also whether if you were to do it again, you do it differently. Are there any particular challenges which you would advise people to avoid?
That's a good point. And thinking about what we did, I think I can say the things that worked well. Well, once is we had one dedicated, I led this project with support of a graduate. So
Mm.
having someone dedicated to it, it's very good. I know it's not easy, but
Yeah.
because this is the type of project that it took some time for us to implement. So looking back, it took some from the early conception that we said, oh, in 2023, let's start doing that, to the actual implementation that was like middle last year. It took some time purely because of focus. Like
Mhm.
I had the goal, but you had to do management day to day, you did these and so on. So I think if you're implementing, I think this is in a broader uh, sense as well, not only for this project, but if you're implementing and trying to implement a complex project, try to get someone, even if it's junior, that can develop on that, but try to get someone that is dedicated or partially dedicated to that given project, to not lose focus, especially with the complexity. This is a complex one. It
Yeah.
gets complex, it can derail very easily. And then the benefits, we from the outset, we are already thinking about which kind of tool would be. We, of
Mm.
course, we started with a database, so thinking about that database, and then during the project, we migrate to this Power BI solution, which is
Okay.
something that came up. So at an early stage, it's important to think about what is going to be the user interface. I think this is pretty important because then you make it as easy as possible for the organization to use that tool.
Why is Power BI good for this kind of use case?
Well, I think the easy answer is that we are being developed and deploying Power BI, but Power BI is a useful tool as
Yeah.
well for visualization, data visualization. So I think we did explore as well at the early stage a tool called Alteryx, and
Okay.
to see how it would actually plays out on the Alteryx, especially on the data gathering and so on. But at the end of the day, Power BI, and actually we were developing and enhancing our Power BI internal capabilities, it came very hand to hand because it's a great tool for visualization. So that's why the reason we've
Great.
selected. Yeah.
I think it would be remiss if we didn't talk about general geopolitical supply issues, risk management, particularly when there's so much uncertainty right now about tariffs, particularly with regards to the US. I believe that US is an important market for Grünenthal, as is the Middle East. I mean, what's your current geographical footprint at the moment, Felipe?
Yeah, so US is definitely an important market for Grünenthal and actually is growing in importance. So
Hmm.
Grünenthal for many years did not have a presence in the United States. And then recently, it's also through acquisitions, we've been growing through the United States and growing and investing in our affiliate in the United States. So that's definitely an important market. In our
Hmm.
footprint, we have suppliers in the US, but also supplying to Europe, so not necessarily supplying the US market. On the political turmoil or the tariffs uncertainty,
Hmm.
I think we do have an internal global operations department that is not part of the external supply, but is an internal operation strategy that sometimes look at these threats, kind of this broader sense threats, and try to evaluate what is the likelihood and so on, and drive actions from that, including potential actions for the external supply, the organization to maybe activate or develop suppliers in certain regions. And I think now to conclude, specifically on the tariffs, is
Hmm.
any action in the pharma industry that requires movement of a product of a tech transfer, it takes time, right? So my take is you are committing to certain large scale projects that will take maybe 2, 3, 4 years to implement. Once you have additional certainty as well of the impact of these actions that are ongoing. So for example, the tariffs, as we unfortunately know, every day is news, right? So we
Hmm.
have new tariffs, but the next day we don't, and then the next day we do. So that's why we're trying to navigate. Currently, we don't have anything active to say, but we do have a kind of standby mode to say what if scenarios. If that materializes, where do we go? And this we kind
Hmm.
of play around the what if scenarios, so to be able to activate those in case those uncertainties materialize into something more certain.
Do you think it's encouraging not just your business, but other pharma companies to sit back and wait and try to see, where's all this going to go and delay decision makings further down the line?
Yeah, I think it depends on which threat or which political scenario we're talking, right?
Mm,
So for the tariffs, what I've been seeing, and also from maybe some CMOs as well, is that they're trying to sell it specifically for the United States, saying now we have a production site in the United States and you can come here. It might be something attractive, although there's a lot of it might be something to consider when we are evaluating a partner, like a presence in the United States that you can
mm,
easily activate tech transfer as well. But if you're talking here about other geopolitical scenarios, maybe in the Middle East, or maybe the situation, well, some situation in Middle East, or maybe China and Taiwan and so on, that is like there is more of a longer term turmoil,
Mm,
or even the situation that we had in COVID, and the API situation that the Europe is relying on API from Asia, right? So on these situations that is more concrete, I think I've been seeing as well organizations trying to set up geographically their value chain already aligned with these more concrete threats versus the
mm.
tariff is which is it's becoming more concrete, but it's still very new.
Previously, you've mentioned your philosophy about not managing CMOs, but starting with the product. So, a product centric approach generally. Could you unpack that for me, please?
Yes, of course. I think as external manufacturing professionals, we can, or at least from the external view, we can say we are managing CMOs. But when we are managing CMOs, if you have that view, you can, I think, easily lose the bigger picture of actually what is your product and what are the criticalities of the product itself. For example, you might be managing a CMO, but you might actually completely then be missing how the logistics part of that CMO, how is it actually getting to your plant or to the customers. So first is, or also process robustness or something that you can influence to that process to make it more robust. So taking the view from CMO management into product management, you are able to gather a team and then you evaluate the end-to-end value chain of that product and
Mhm.
identify the weak links, weak spots that can jeopardize supply reliability. And then, and then with that, you can actually, what I mentioned before, being an easy client, uh, you can identify these weak spots and then go to your CMO and then be really laser focused on what are the issues and what are the important things you need to your product because you identify these weak spots. I think that allows you to not lose focus on the discussion with the CMO and really focus on what matters to your product and everything else that entails. Yeah.
Thank you. I wonder what advice you might be able to share, please, Felipe, with other external manufacturing leaders who maybe are dealing with some of the same challenges that you are. So whether that's about being a mid-sized company and dealing with CMOs, or whether it's about M&A integration, political uncertainty. Are there any practical recommendations, or maybe it's a sort of a Bain Company style tool or framework which you might be able to recommend?
I think what we do is being dealing with a large CMO landscape is to really understand, like going back to really understand the product and how the CMO is supporting, or CMO or CMOs is supporting that product. So really understanding the importance. I think this is the mindset of the product, is because then you can talking about mitigation, you can talk many, not only with the CMO, you can talk about stock buildup and so on. So understanding your product and how your external value chain supports that product to serve the patient is key. I cannot think about a specific framing from that, from even from my from my time at Bain, but then like from product prioritization into how this CMO landscape or external value chain supports that product to be served. And I'm going to use now the global operations mission at Grünenthal, how this product value chain supports serving safe, reliable, and efficient supply to patients. So that is
Mm.
our mission. So safe, reliable, and efficient, and that's how this external value chain supports that goal. Yeah.
Is it deliberately in that order, would you say, in terms of like the priorities, like safety first, reliability, efficiency?
I would say it's safety is a given, right? So safety is a
Mm.
given a product safety, and then reliability is in the size of the service. So I think comes from the angle of the quality service cost element. And yes, so I would say safety is a given. You cannot provide anything that is reliability. Your patients, they need the product when they need to have the product when they actually need. And then the efficient is in how do we actually strive to make the value chain more efficient, so cost effective is also for the benefit of the company.
Yeah.
So
Are there any things you'd advise people not to do? Maybe if it's to do with legacy products, which perhaps are just going along absolutely fine as there are there times where you think actually maybe don't do that because it's more trouble than it's worth?
Yeah, I think there's sometimes we it you if you touch some products or thinking about some opportunities, you might actually generate start to find elements that you cannot fix. So
Mm,
legacy products, for example, once you touch, you might be well, often you need to bring up to today's standards, either analytical and so on. So sometimes you might be seeing something as an opportunity, but that opportunity how it materializes, it depends on that the quality of that legacy product and how and then how we're actually estimating the effort. So I think you can
mm,
always do it, but how you're actually adequately estimating the effort. So I would say that if it's a borderline case, just estimate for some buffer, especially for an old legacy product. The standards are not going to be up there for today's standards, so then you might actually spend more resources and time, and then all of a sudden the decision it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
mm,
And I think from what we should do, or like external professionals should do, it's really rely on the technical expertise, internal, but not only internal, challenge the technical expertise of CMOs. I think CMOs, the standard of CMOs is saying there are some things that we hear a lot is that they're end-to-end solution providers, they are technically capable and so on. But
mm.
then it's really for an external manufacturing professional, I would say pay attention and double click and challenge the technical capabilities of the team, not only the facilities, but the team. Who is executing that? Who is troubleshooting that? Engineering, scientists, and so on. Because these are the people that are actually going to be working with you and your technical team when actually the trouble happened.
And then one final question. What's next for you? What's next for the team? Is there a particular project or initiative in the coming year that you're excited about?
I'm very excited to continue supporting Grünenthal in its growth trajectory and then, as I mentioned, as part of the Grünenthal strategy of integrations, we to strive in this what's called flawless integrations that we expand our supply base. We're still
Mm,
very active in the M&A sphere, and as we speak, I'm in the middle of a due diligence and then evaluating that. So what is going to be next is actually more growth for the external value organization as well. And so I'm very excited indeed. I think Grünenthal is in a growth trajectory which is really positive, and this growth trajectory that involves it involves as part of the strategy growth through acquisition. That will mean that we're going to go to supply base, and then so the challenges are going to keep coming. So how do we actually shape that future external supply organization without knowing what's coming? So
mm.
it's very exciting to be in this position, and it's a good problem to have in hand.
Thank you. Felipe, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Pleasure to speak to you. And until next time. Thanks a lot.